Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. So, today we have someone very special with us, and I'll give her official title and then we'll get into why she's so special. So, today we're speaking with Dalia Ziada. Dalia is an Egyptian scholar and someone who's very smart, and I read her stuff a lot on X and other places. And so, Dalia is also an official title as a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. And Dalia, I've been trying to reach you for a long time, so it's a true pleasure to speak with you finally.
Thank you so much, Ariel. I'm so happy to be with you finally, and I look forward to a rich conversation today.
Likewise. So, Dalia, I think a day or two ago, you wrote on your X about the fact that you are now being investigated for being pretty much, as I understand, a spy for the Israelis in Egypt by the Egyptian authorities. They're like anti-terrorism equivalent, I guess, maybe of the Shin Bet in Israel, the FBI in the US. Uh, but it's a lot less democratic in Egypt. You don't have rights there. You mentioned that the punishments that people usually get for this could be death or stripping of your citizenship, which is why you're not going back to Egypt anytime soon, which is your homeland. Can you maybe take us back? I know you've spoken about this a lot, but just through that, we're going to understand what's happening in Egypt now. Take us back to what you have been going through all the way back since October 7th until today.
Thank you, Ariel. Actually, the persecution I am exposed to by the Egyptian government and the Egyptian people right now is so revealing to the political hypocrisy of Egypt, as I like to call it. Because from one side, we already have a peace treaty with Israel. Israel has been a great neighbor for Egypt, even better than some Arab countries, that we call them brothers and sisters. Israel was even better than them. We had economic cooperation, we had security cooperation. I still remember when I saw with my own eyes, Israeli diplomats and high profile officials in the UN, in international area, like circles, advocating for Egypt after the fall of the Muslim Brotherhood and saying, we want this regime to, I mean, the new leadership in Egypt of Sisi, I mean, to succeed because they are going to combat the Muslim Brotherhood. And when President El Sisi, when he was a Minister of Defense, reached out to Israel to get an agreement on getting closer to the border in Sinai to fight against Hamas, Israel's response was amazing. They did not only say, okay, we will give you the approval and you will come closer to the border. No, they said, we are coming to fight with you. And for the first time in 2015, we saw the IDF and the Egyptian military fighting together against Hamas. So, I mean, and let alone also the cooperation on gas exploration and exportation in the Mediterranean, which was awesome. So, keeping all of this in mind, it was so shocking to see the reaction of the Egyptian people and the Egyptian government to the October 7 attacks. Of course, I mean, for the audience who don't know, people in my country, Egypt, and in the Arab world, all over the Arab world, were celebrating October 7th. We're celebrating Hamas as champions of resistance. We're blaming Israel for October 7th. Believe it or not, Egypt was one of the first countries to issue a press release on the day of October 7th. If you read the press release, it's not sympathizing with the victims of October 7th. It's not saying that Hamas did something wrong. No, no, no. It's just asking Israel to practice self restraint because what happened on October 7th is actually Israel's fault because it's a result of 70 years of occupation, which actually gave me the impression that this perhaps was written in this press release perhaps was written in the Qatari embassy. It cannot be written in the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was crazy. And then when actually at the beginning I thought, okay, this is politics. I was not really involved with much until I saw the videos of what happened on October 7th. I saw this about one or 2 weeks after actually October 7th. I was invited to a video conference by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense in Israel. It's a video conference, so it was online, and I was in Cairo at that time. and they invited over 200 journalists and writers and activists and scholars from think tanks. All of them are Arabs, and the video conference was in Arabic. They showed us the videos collected from the houses, the kibbutzim, from
The
the mobile
GoPro cameras.
phones, yeah, from the cameras in the street, from the mobile phones of the terrorists, from the live streaming that some of the terrorists were putting on Telegram, and so on. So they showed us this footage, and after I saw it, Ariel, I felt compelled to stand up for these victims. Like, people are taken from their home literally in their pajamas, on a holiday morning, and being tortured, killed, kidnapped, including children, toddlers, the elderly. Why? Why such a brutality? So I took on myself the mission to speak up to my Arab fellows, to speak up to them and tell them, no, this is what happened on October 7. It's not like what our media is saying. It was only just a clash between Israeli soldiers and Hamas militants. So I started first by my social media platforms. I have good following on social media. So I started there, and then I was invited to comment on that in mainstream media. I made some interviews. One of them was in Arabic with Institute for National Security Studies, Tel Aviv University. And it was in Arabic, and I think this is the problem, that it was in Arabic, so it reached as many Arab audience as possible, and it went viral. And all I said in this interview is that what Hamas did is definitely a terrorist crime, and Hamas are terrorists. And if Arab countries are thinking straight, they should be backing Israel in this war against Hamas and the Iranian regime. So, but as you can see, I'm just stating facts. But of course, saying this to an audience who are celebrating Hamas as champions because they killed people on October 7, let's be precise, because they killed Jewish people on October 7, this stirred a horrible backlash against me. Started first by radical Islamists, first actually by state media, state supervised media, inciting against me, calling me a traitor, naming me all the names you can imagine, including even inviting members of parliament to appear on talk shows on the national TV to say bad things about me, to say that I should be punished, I should be executed, things like that. And then immediately, I'm telling you, this happened like very quickly, like in 3 days. Then immediately after that, I received a group called the Salafists. It's a group among the Salafists, radical, very far radical Islamists who are very popular in Egypt, unfortunately now, especially among the grassroots citizens. They are active in my family neighborhood. They went to my mother's house looking for me. And it was very, very scary. Thank God I was not there. My mother met with them and she immediately called me. I was in my apartment in another neighborhood. So once she called me, I contacted the Egyptian authorities, the security
Wait one
authorities.
second, Dalia. Can I? They went to your mother. They met her. What they wanted to kill you, right? It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
like
they asked it for me. They said, we want to ask her about the statements she made. We want to speak to her. But of course, when they say this about someone, it means they want to
it's
do
like the
harm.
mafia. We just want to talk.
They are literally thugs in religious clothes. I call them so. They previously attacked Coptic Christians in our neighborhood. They attacked also some other journalists who wrote about the against the Muslim Brotherhood, and so they attacked him while praying on a Friday sermon. So you can imagine how horrible they are.
So you called the
So
authorities.
yeah, so once I got the news, of course, this is the scariest thing that happened. It's not only a death threat coming to my phone, it's real people going to my family house looking for me. So I called the security authorities, and like a very high profile officer who could really actually help me. He was very cool. He was like, as if, and he said to me, like, we have nothing to do with you anymore. You made the entire country angry by your statements, and you deserve what you get. You, like, go, you have to be punished for it. And for him, and when I was shocked, of course, when I asked him, like, why aren't you also against Hamas and these Islamist groups? He said, this is not the issue. The issue is that you said you support Israel's right to defend itself. So this was, so from the side of the Islamists, my crime is that I said Hamas is a terrorist organization, and from the Egyptian authorities' perspective is that I said Israel has the right to defend itself. So of course I had, unfortunately, the next morning, I woke up to the. It was this. First of all, I didn't sleep. Of course, it was the scariest night of my life. I remember I had to turn off the lights in my apartment so nobody knows that I'm inside. Imagine how scary it was. So the next morning, I woke up to the news that there are about 4 legal claims filed against me by lawyers. Later on, I knew they are very close to the Egyptian regime, and they are accusing me they filed the claims to the attorney general, accusing me of all sorts of things, starting from spreading false information, threatening Egypt's national security. Like, look at me threatening Egypt's national security, committing high treason, collaborating with Israeli entities, and the funniest of all, spying for the Israeli Mossad. Which, as hilarious as this sound, actually, but these are real accusations in the Egyptian penal code. I mean, real charges that could lead to either life sentence or death sentence. So,
And
so I
by the
had.
way, Dalia, just to maybe let people understand a little bit that it's not just that you're charged, it's basically that you're also found guilty at the same time you're being charged. Because I assume, like you said, these lawyers are close to the authorities. They're not going to charge you and they're not going to press the charges unless they're pretty sure you're going to be found guilty. You're not going to be able to really have representation. No judge is going to be objective about these charges. So you understood, I guess, that this was over.
You know what proves your point is that they acted very quickly. Actually, our judicial system in Egypt is very slow. It doesn't act this quick. But immediately after these were filed, an arrest warrant was issued against me. But thank God I left by then. And then legal claims are open until today, and the escalation until today, 16 months after this happened, I'm still persecuted for my opinion in support of Israel and against Hamas, which is
What is the
horrible.
new charges against you? Because there's a development.
The latest escalation, it was just last week. One of the legal claims filed against me recently, it's also repeating the same charges of or accusations of collaborating with Israel, threatening national security, and so on. It was forwarded by the Attorney General. The Attorney General referred the case to the Supreme State Security Prosecution. Okay, let me say it again. The Attorney General in Egypt forwarded this case to the Supreme State Security Prosecution. The Supreme State Security Prosecution, which called the Triple SP, is very notorious for targeting activists and people with political opinions that the regime is not happy with. And it was used against state officials, it was used against activists, it was used against writers, it was used against professors and academics, it was used even against people from different backgrounds. Although it's initial, how it was initially started, it was started to fast track investigations into terrorism cases, but actually it was only not only but mainly used against people with political opinion, not terrorists, accusing them of committing high treason like espionage, as I am accused, or terrorism. So it's a very scary development. No one I know from among the people who were very close to me, I mean throughout the journey of change in Egypt or in the region, who went through this process, the procedures of the Supreme State Security prosecution and survived it. Nobody survived it. And as you said earlier, actually, it's only a setup to make things appear legal. It's not an actual prosecution. It's not an actual legal procedure. No, it's just a whitewashing the repression that the regime practices on political activists. So me being put there, it's unthinkable for me, really, because we are speaking about Egypt, which is, for God's sake, has a peace treaty with Israel, which means there is nothing, or there should not be anything in the Egyptian laws that punish people for working with Israelis or talking to Israelis, because we are not enemies. We have a peace treaty between the two states.
Yes, I'm going to ask you about that specifically because I think, but maybe before that. So you are right now safe. We don't want to give your location because we don't want people like those people to come to where you are now. You're not in Egypt because if you were there, you would be either, I assume, dead by the government or by the crazy people in the streets that were looking for you. And so we're able to talk to you and that you are safe. Um, and I think it should be said that you're very brave, and which is why seems to me the next question would, and the obvious one is, Egypt is a place with how many over 100 million people, right, or something, I forgot exactly, but millions upon millions of citizens. And the only person, maybe as far as I can remember, or at least that was published, that said anything like even a little bit controversial, a little bit not nice about Hamas, a little bit not nice about, nice about Israel, like we have the right to live, was you in the entire country. How could this be?
I know it's crazy, right? Actually, in over 100 million people, there were only three people who dared to publicly condemn Hamas. I was one of them. Now, as you know, I'm seeking refuge in a Western country. The other one is seeking refuge in Canada, and the third one is a media personality who is who's going through very very tough fights with the general public, the Islamists, and also the Egyptian regime. So, and maybe sooner or later he will leave too. But I mean, look at the three of us who publicly condemned Hamas. As far as I know, I am perhaps the only one who said that I support Israel's right to defend itself. And I still insist on that. It's
But
Israel's
why
right
is
to
that
defend.
controversial? Why, like, the
Exactly.
reason why I'm asking is that we in 78 signed, we started the negotiations with the Egyptians. We have a peace treaty with the Egyptians. The Egyptian military, which is basically who runs the country, is all the time talking with the Israeli military about what's happening in the Sinai, in Gaza now, and in all these. You mentioned in 2015, but even before and even after, we have the whole thing with in the Sinai. With the, you know better than me, but I remember the Bedouins, that there was ISIS organizations there where we were helping them intelligence wise, and there was coordination about the peace treaty allowed a certain amount of soldiers to come into the Sinai. Israel allowed with the Egyptians, coordinated, let more soldiers in. Everybody's talking with the Israelis on the official authorities. It's not. It shouldn't be a secret. And yet, when one person says, you're coordinating with their army, so obviously you recognize de facto that they have a right to defend themselves. Why is it controversial?
It's a very good question because it could have different answers. One, because unfortunately we still have people inside the political leadership system in Egypt, including, for example, it's still part of the Egyptian military's ideology that Israel is our historical enemy, and they repeat this all the time. They don't consider the peace treaty with Israel a peace treaty. They consider it some kind of a strategic agreement. And actually, someone who was a former general in one of the TV shows in Egypt described it as an open term hudna, an open term truce with
And a
Israel.
hudna, we should say, hudna is
Truce.
basically a truce, but that will be broken when we feel the need to break it.
Exactly, exactly. It's an open date truce, so we can break it whenever we want. So this is the mindset, in the leadership. On the grassroots level or on the public general level, it's even worse because it's not only looking at Israel as a historical enemy for nationalistic reasons or because one day we had a war with Israel or so, but also because people are brainwashed with the narrative that describes the Jewish people as enemy to Muslims. This is the narrative of radical Islamists, unfortunately, but it's so prominent in Egypt and in many other Arab countries that this war is a holy war, a jihad on the Jews. Not just an issue about like for example fighting for a just situation for the Gazans or so. No, for them it's about destroying Israel and destroying the Jewish people for religious reasons. So these two layers among the grassroots citizens is making them created some kind of an outrage that the government could not control, I believe, at the beginning. So they needed some kind of a scapegoat or a punching bag. And it seems they found an easy scapegoat in me, an easy punching bag in me. And they keep, throwing me to the people from time to time. I'm telling you, like 16 months since then, and it's still going on. So every time there is like a domestic problem inside the country, like economic problem, political problem, or so, the newspapers put all of this aside and they just speak about me and my statements. It's crazy. It's crazy, you know?
You're a celebrity in Egypt. So,
Oh my God, in a very bad way. In a very bad way,
notorious
unfortunately.
celebrity. But
Yeah,
maybe
unfortunately.
one more follow up on that is that one of the things in Israel we talk about was that the peace with Egypt is called the cold peace. In Hebrew, it will be shalom kar. So it's not like with the Emiratis, Israelis are going there. There's business ties. There's friendships. I have friends that are there. All they open businesses, kosher restaurants in the Emirates. There's a sort of feeling that there's nothing to be afraid of. These people have a common interest with us, and we can not only do business but actually thrive together. With Egypt, and I think that's because the people in the Emirates, whatever your opinion of their government, whatever, have a haven't been brainwashed in a way that it seems to me what you're saying is you cannot have a warm peace, a real peace that lasts when the people are being taught to hate you. So it's like we talk a lot about this two-state solution in Israel, and one of the things that Israel keeps on demanding is that the Palestinians change the way they educate their children, not to hate Jews, not to want to kill Jews, not to give money to people who are in jail for killing Israelis, and etc. I think the same thing can be said for Egypt. We have an entire society that's being taught on a daily basis through media. You probably could tell me better, on schools, that the Jews are the enemy.
Unfortunately, true, Ariel. But let me start from the Abraham Accords because it's really a big achievement. The Abraham Accords are the only real peace between Arabs and Israel. All the peace treaties that were signed before that are actually nothing more than strategic agreements, indeed, as the Egyptians call it, including the one with Jordan, the one with Egypt, even the recent maritime borders agreement with Lebanon, and so all of these are only strategic agreements. They are not real peace. I call them peace accords of necessity, while the Abraham Accords are peace accords of choice. United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain, and so they chose to have peace with Israel, not because they were forced, because of some regional political circumstances or domestic circumstances in their countries, to have peace with Israel, as was the case with Egypt in 1970s, for example. So this makes it real peace, but for us, no, it was not a real peace. And the what proves this is that I tell you from my own experience. I was born long after the peace treaty was signed, and you would expect that at least we will the negative rhetoric about Israel, about the Jewish people, the anti-Semitic rhetoric will stop, but it didn't. In my school, in my primary school, we had a lesson in the Arabic book. I still remember it very well. And I think it is still being taught until today, celebrating the Yom Kippur War. and speaking like the
Celebrating it, how celebrating it? Saying
as a
that you
victory,
won? Yeah.
as a victory of Egypt. Yeah. And then after we take the lessons, they take us to a museum that is mainly dedicated to the Yom Kippur War, which shows the captured Israeli tanks and things like that, and how the Egyptians crossed to the other side, and so. But of course, they don't tell us the other side, the second part of the story, that actually Israel ended defeating us. I mean, ended up defeating us. I mean, so they don't tell the full story. They selected only part of it, and to indoctrinate the students generation after generation that Israel is our enemy. And not even once, not in a textbook in my whole life, in school or university or so, there is any mention about the peace treaty with Israel. Nothing. Nothing. Every year, we celebrate on October 6th. We celebrate the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War as a national day. It's a big celebration, It's the army. They call it the Armed Forces Day. It's a national day. It's a day off. People celebrate. The media celebrate, and so. And also, no mention of the anniversary of the peace treaty, which is even more worth celebrating. Even worse, Ariel, when you go to the mosque on Friday sermons in Egypt, you would find a stable prayer recited by almost all the mosques. I grew up hearing it and thinking that it is true. It's a prayer, you'd think that it's coming, it has a divine source or something. And the prayer is about cursing the Jews and who support them. اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم. Yeah, let God curse the Jews and those who support them. So, imagine growing up yes, I can understand why the people in Egypt hate me now so much, because they grew up listening to all of that, grew up brainwashed by all of that.
Dalia, so how did you just finally on this topic? Why are you not brainwashed? I guess the question is.
I was actually,
Oh,
I
you
was,
were.
I was
So how are
until
you speaking to us like this now?
Yeah, I experienced an epiphany moment in my life when I was 18 years old that changed me completely. So at that time, I was a freshman student, or a fresh woman, as I like to call it, in a university in Cairo. And it was the year of the second intifada. It was a big, the second intifada was a big issue in the region, as you know, and there were protests all over the Arab world, especially on university campuses and so. Very similar to what we're seeing in the US and Europe right now, by the way. And I was just one of the students. Oh, it's very cool. It's trendy. I bought on a kufiya. I joined the protests, and so it's a trendy thing. And then and of course, I'm in my mind, in my background, Israel is our enemy. Yeah, So let's go. Let me go and join the protests against Israel. Until about 2 months or a month and a half after protesting or joining these protests in one day, in one beautiful sunny day, I mean, like most of the days in Cairo, the protesters, the people organizing the protests, whom later on I discovered they are the Muslim Brotherhood, decided to burn some flags. So they started first by burning the Israeli flag, which, okay, made sense, because it's a protest against Israel. Then they burned the American flag, which I couldn't understand. Like, what? Why? America is very far away. Why they are burning the flag? And then they burned the Egyptian flag. And this was the moment of shock that made me doubt everything. Because if you know, in Egypt, we have very strong nationalist sentiments. The flag is something to be highly respected. It shouldn't be insulted in any way. So doing this made me, okay, take a step back and say, this cannot be good people and do something like this. Something's wrong. And really, are they burning the Egyptian flag to support Gaza? What is Gaza? Why should I care about Gaza if they are burning my flag? Which is important? What's my priority? So I took a step back. It was literally the moment I got out of the ideological box I was stuck into my whole life. And I decided to educate myself about the whole issue, about, first of all, including even my own religion, about Islam, about Islamism and Islamist groups, about the Muslim Brotherhood, about the geopolitics of the Middle East, about Judaism. And it's a great religion, by the way. It's a great religion, especially its emphasis on this current life, not the afterlife, and how to make this current life a great place. It's amazing. And these are concepts that I have adopted in my life, by the way, since then. And also educated myself about Israel, that they are calling it the enemy. And I was shocked to discover how similar we are. And it was also my first time to learn that there is something called Egyptian Jews. Imagine, like I was 18 years old, and it was my first time to know that there is something called Egyptian Jews. So since then, my perception changed about everything, and I became an advocate for peace with Israel, Arab-Israeli peace, and also an advocate for Muslim-Jewish dialogue, and also fighting against radical Islamists like the Muslim Brotherhood. So my life changed completely since then.
So from this happened when you were 18 at your first year at the university. I think I don't even know what, like when I was 18, I didn't know. Maybe not in Israel. You go to the army at the age of 18, so you get a little more. It depends also where you are in the army, but it's very like most people don't have epiphanies. So I don't know, but I do wanted to just as you were thinking, I was like, who were your friends? Because if at 18 you, I mean, it's a little bit off topic, but I have to ask, who were your friends? Did you have friends as an 18-year-old who was saying these types of things?
I had friends and I lost friends actually in the process. But let me tell you, actually, it's not that dark. I mean, yes, I lost many friends, but over the journey, not only at the time when I was in university, but even after that, from my work on Arab Israeli dialogue and Muslim Jewish dialogue and democratization in Egypt. And so I met amazing people who agree with me, who shares the same vision. Of course, not all of them are very outspoken because they know that this comes with consequences, this comes with punishment, but actually they do exist. And I can show you, like, I have many messages on my social media platforms coming from people until today who are telling me, people who are Arabs, by the way, young Arabs. They are telling me, we agree with all what you're saying. You're absolutely doing the right thing. Yes, we hate Hamas. Yes, we hate these radical Islamists, but we cannot speak up. We cannot just do what you're doing.
Yes, which is another. By the way, I would imagine that since what happened to you, where you had to leave Egypt, you've met lots. I assume. I know. I don't assume. I know people who have met you since then, and have gone to know you and your work, and who I don't know if you consider them friends, but they consider you a friend and they really, really appreciate you. So I assume that you have gained lots of friends since this whole issue started. And so now I want to talk to you enough about the personal, which we can, through that, we learned a lot about Egypt, the internal. It's very sad, actually, because if there wasn't all this brainwashing, we could have so much, literally a lot of things that we can have in common, like you said, and making the place a better place for both of our peoples. Okay, I want to talk about something that we've been starting to see in Israel. The prime minister has a few times hinted at it, which is that the Israeli military has seen the Egyptian military growing its forces in the Sinai not in accordance with the peace accords, which mandated up until a certain amount of soldiers. We said before that Israel allowed the Egyptians to bring in more forces during the fight against Hamas and ISIS at the time. But since then, now, since October 7th, more and more, supposedly there were reports that Israel asked America to tell Egypt to take the forces back. I saw an article, the prime minister's office said, we don't want to talk about it. It's ongoing behind the scenes. But people in Israel are talking more and more about, should we be worried? What are the Egyptians looking for here? Why are they bringing in soldiers at such a large amount? Why are they building bases of new air bases in the Sinai? What are they looking to do?
The short answer, yes, we should be worried. You and us, Egyptians. I mean, you, Israel, and us, Egyptians, everyone should be worried because the tensions are getting to an unprecedented level between the two countries. So, this is the short answer. The long answer, let me tell you that actually these tensions have been building up for at least 6 months ago, for at least 6 months now. The tensions between Egypt and Israel started first by the disappointment Israel had in Egypt from its reaction to October 7th. Of course, I mean, it was kind of Egypt's position was kind of the blind spot that Israel did not see coming. And it was so shocking. And this created the first friction or the first rift. It broke the first rift between the two countries. And this rift kept widening to the scene we are seeing now. The two troops from both countries are pointing at each other on the border and waiting for a spark of conflict to start at any moment. Of course, this is not something that I'm sure neither Egypt wanted or Israel wanted, but how we got to this situation has to be investigated. There are many factors that led to that. First, the point of disappointment, which I just mentioned. Second, lack of communication between the appropriate officials on the Egyptian side and the Israeli side. They focused mostly in the past few months on Gaza, Hamas, the ceasefire. Qatar was involved in all of that, but they did not talk about the most important topic, which is their bilateral relationship, the future of the Egypt-Israel relationship after October 7th. They didn't speak about that, which is the most important thing, because these are two neighbors that are so interdependent economically and security-wise. They have to speak about that. They didn't. They spoke about everything else except their bilateral relationship. The third thing is, unfortunately, the growing interference of Qatar in the Egyptian politics. And this is something that not many people are talking about. Maybe they are scared to upset Qatar or to upset Egypt, but this is a fact. This is already happening. And I can clearly see it because I can see a shift in the position of the Egyptian government that cannot be explained otherwise. Qatar is kind of bribing Egypt through direct investments in the economy at a time when Egypt is facing an unprecedented economic crisis. Qatar is bribing Egypt to keep Egypt also supportive to the policies of the axis of resistance. And the policy, which, when I say the axis of resistance, I don't mean the Iranian axis of resistance, I mean the state level axis of resistance between Turkey, Qatar, and Iran, or we can call it the axis of evil, if you like. So between the axis of evil and the to keep Egypt, I mean, on the side of the axis of evil, Qatar is bribing Egypt to do that. And unfortunately, Egypt is already doing the job that is required from it. What makes me even more concerned about the Egyptian troops in Sinai now is that these troops are composed of young people who are charged with all the hate you can imagine towards Israel, either through their indoctrination process, like being indoctrinated when they were at school, at the mosque or so, or even within the military systems that still refers to Israel as an enemy, as a historical enemy, okay? That still refers to Israel as a historical enemy. So this is one thing. These people, and why I fear that, because we had an incident that not many people perhaps don't know about, just 3 months before October 7, in June 2023, an Egyptian soldier, from just similar to all the soldiers who are running the troops or operating the troops in Sinai right now, waiting just for the signal to start a war against Israel. A soldier similar to those crossed the border from Sinai into Kerem Shalom, into Israel, and killed Israeli soldiers on the other side while they were asleep. and he planned for it. And supposedly we have a peace treaty. So all of this does not make any sense. When this story was told in the Egyptian media, people celebrated this soldier and they are calling him a hero. There are people now who are naming their houses or their streets after him. They are making him literally a hero.
For
So
killing
imagine,
Israelis, basically.
yeah, for killing Israelis, exactly, for nothing other than that, for killing Israelis, for killing Jews, exactly. So, so imagine there are how many people like him are now in Sinai operating the troops that are supposed or preparing, building up to fighting against Israel. So Egypt is justifying this by saying, "Oh no, we are only preparing in case Hamas infiltrated into Sinai once again. We are worried about this front because of the tensions between Hamas and Israel, and we're just it's just for self-defense and so." But it's definitely wrong, and I think its main purpose, if not leading to a war, God forbid, but its main purpose to further pressure Israel so it can accept the Qatari terms about ceasefire, about rescuing Hamas, about installing Hamas once again on in the leadership in Gaza. All of these things, because as you know, Qatar's priority is to throw a lifeline to Hamas all the time. And this is what they are doing. And now they are using Egypt as a pawn to pressure Israel to do this.
And one other thing that I think goes into what you just said, and which is the last question about Egypt, and then we will talk about other places around us. Israel is a very interesting region. Everyone hates us, but somehow they can't be without us. It's very weird. But my last question is on Egypt. People don't know in the West, it's pretty mind blowing that when they argue there's a blockade on Gaza, the Gazans, it's an open air prison, all these other things, there's occupation. It's very weird. I was protesting in 2005 and getting beat up by Israeli police against the disengagement from Gaza. But now they tell me we're still there. I don't understand what I was protesting against. But okay. So people forget that Egypt has a border with Gaza. And so it's had a border with Gaza for many, many years, ever since it itself controlled Gaza until the 67 war. And so I guess my question is, I remember after October 7th, Egypt put these huge barbed wires on the border with Gaza. They did not allow any people fleeing the war to go into the Sinai is huge. There's a lot of territory you could build camps to make sure they won't be able to like go into proper Egypt. There's ways to do it. They instead kept people in, and we know now that corrupt officers were taking tons of money to get people out. So only rich Gazans were able to run away, and the rich Gazans usually are members of family of Hamas. And so what you had was an interesting dynamic where people who were innocent were and poor because they were not connected are kept in the fight, and Hamas members who are in charge of this whole thing are being able to smuggle their families out because they have the money. What are we to learn from the way Egypt is handling its border with Gaza?
Actually, it's a shame, and I'm saying I'm very ashamed as an Egyptian that actually when the time came to help innocent people, we didn't. Although Egypt is just well, they are singing love to the Palestinians and the Gazans day and night. The Egyptian president himself made a conference at the beginning of the war and was shouting at the end of the conference, "Viva Palestina!" "Tahya Palestine!" Imagine, But when it came to really taking an action to save the lives of the people, of the really innocent people, the real women and children who need to be saved from this war, Egypt refused to open the border for them, claiming so many things that none of them make sense to me, actually. The first is that they will be a threat to Egypt's security because they will move from Sinai into the mainland of Egypt, which is close to along the Nile Valley. If you look at the map, Egypt is huge. Egypt is huge, really. Sinai alone is three times the size of Israel. So when you say, like, a group, Gaza, all in all, is 1.5 million people, 1.5 million. So when you say, let's imagine like how many will come, like, innocent 1 million, let's say 1 million, and of course it will not be 1 million, it will be much less than that, but let's say 1 million, they can easily disappear into Sinai. And the idea that they can walk or go from Sinai to the mainland is nonsense, not only because it's a vast, vast desert, they cannot do that, but also because there are many checkpoints controlled by the military along this way. I mean, to cross the Suez Canal from the side of Sinai into the mainland of Egypt is a big process, even for us as Egyptians. It's a big, big process. You have to provide papers, you have to get permits. It's a big process. So it's not that easy. So this claim that they will be a threat to Egypt's security or so is nonsense. Second, they said they will be a burden on our economy. Well, we have already refugees from Syria, Sudan, Iraq, other countries, Libya even, that went through civil wars in the past decade or so, and they are living in Egypt, and actually they are not a burden on the economy.
And Dalia, just on that point, the world would probably put tons of money on these refugees. The entire world, America, Europe, you would be able to get good funding, which would probably actually help the Egyptian economy in retrospect, thinking about it.
Similar to the example of Turkey, when they took the Syrian refugees in large numbers, the world offered them money already. So Egypt did not do that also either. And I just want you to imagine how many lives could have been saved if only Egypt opened the only door that these people can escape from. Because what Hamas did was so heinous. Actually, they committed their terrorist crimes and then they ran and hid among the civilians, and they exposed the civilians to the hell of war purposefully, so they die in large numbers. I mean, this was the purpose of Hamas. They even made statements about it. Haniyeh made statements about it, calling them the fuel, calling the people, the children and the women, calling them the fuel of our revolution. Oh my God, it's so scary. Like, I have goosebumps, when I say that. It's so scary. Like, you see these human beings, children, innocent women, as fuel for your revolution. It's not for your revolution as Hamas. It's nonsense. So we have Hamas is doing this to them. On the other hand, Egypt is trapping them inside. And I tell you, one of my experiences actually in the week before I leave, just 1 week before I leave, there was a family in Gaza, about 25 people. Part of them left in the immediately after October 7th. They knew something bad is going to happen. It's a family I know personally. They are not Hamas or anything. They left immediately and were able to immigrate to Norway. And the other part of the family is stuck inside. About 8 people or so are still stuck inside. So they approached me through another network and I contacted another network of friends or so we can help them get out as fast as possible. Because we knew now, there is a war coming, so we have to make sure to get them out. So we had to take permissions from both sides. So on the Israeli side, it was very easy to take the stamp. Very, very easy. It took no time. They said, okay, here is the stamp, let them go. When we came to the Egyptian side, they refused to give us any stamps, the Egyptian intelligence. And this is what they told us. They told us, go and speak to a Sinai company, a company in Sinai that's actually led by Sinai militia, by some militia in Sinai, but it's called a tourist company, but it's not a tourist company. It's Sinai militia that put people on buses and take money from them to people from Gaza, I mean, on buses. Smugglers, exactly, but under the eye of the government, under the eye of the military. They bribe them, and they even pay the officers, the security authorities there, they pay them commission for each bus coming in Egypt, so we went and spoke with these groups, this so-called tourist company in Sinai, and we asked them, we want these people, this family to get out. There are 8 people, and here's what they told us: we have to pay how much? $5,000 per person, and if it is a male and under 30 years old, we have to pay $7,000. Can you?
People became millionaires on this specific thing in the past year and a half. You have a whole class of Egyptian millionaires just using the pain and the danger of the Gazans, basically.
And even what broke my heart even more is when after the ceasefire, the fallen ceasefire was made in February, I think January or February, earlier this year. There were an exchange of hostages to prisoners. So some of the all of the prisoners actually came on buses operated by this tourist company in Sinai, from Gaza into Egypt, into Cairo, not Sinai, to Cairo directly. And they are jihadists from Fatah, from Hamas, from the Islamic Jihad. They are people with blood on their hands. First of all, they were received as heroes on the border by Egyptians who were waving the Egyptian flag, receiving them, with joy and pride. And then they stayed at a hotel. They put them in a very fancy hotel that existed like a few streets away from my apartment. And you can't imagine, Ariel, it broke my heart that these people are there in my neighborhood. They get a very good hotel. It's owned by the military in Egypt. A very good hotel. They are enjoying their life in my own neighborhood, which I cannot go back to because of them. I cannot go there anymore, but they are there. So just imagine. I call it the schizophrenia of the Egyptian regime and the Egyptian public. It's the schizophrenia of Egypt, really. It's very hard to understand. Like, it's a shame. It's a shame.
And it's very weird also, and I'm not gonna. I want to go to another subject, but that Egypt is very hard on the Muslim Brotherhood. They put them at this regime. Remember what happened with Morsi and all this from the Arab Spring. But on the other hand, they're letting a lot of these. Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, and so we have all this, we'll put the actual Muslim Brotherhood in jail and kill them and disappear them. But on the other hand, because our public loves these what they're doing to the Jews in Israel, we'll be tolerant of them. The whole thing is very weird, and so I would just
Actually, the
say
truth, the truth is they don't object the Muslim Brotherhood. They only reject the Muslim Brotherhood when they are a threat to them, either in Egypt, Jordan, or any other place. A threat to the throne. If they are a threat to the throne of El Sisi or King Abdullah or so, then they are hated. But if they are a threat to the Jews, if they are attacking Israel, they are heroes.
yes, exactly. Okay. So another thing, you study this region we mentioned in the beginning, not just Egypt. You know basically everything that's happening. It's your life's work, and so I want to ask you about another front to our north of where I'm sitting. We had a war with Hezbollah for the day after, on October 8th. Hezbollah shot its first rockets into Israel. I think, by the way, that the Israeli government made a mistake by taking people out of their homes. It basically gave Hezbollah a free pass to, for example, shoot at Kiryat Shmona because no one was there. And other places that were the same distance from Lebanon but weren't evacuated got a lot less missiles. And so we can see that once you concede that no one's there and they know that if no one dies, but there's just, people getting scared or property damages, you're not going to hit them back as hard. So they let themselves go. I think that was a mistake. But regardless, we had the beeper thing, then we killed Nasrallah, and we basically destroyed Hezbollah. At this point, inside Lebanon, we know that the trend is going against Hezbollah internally also, which is a good thing. Um, and the Americans are putting a lot more pressure than they did at the time. And so what happened was the Syrian regime of Assad, I think the main reason why it collapsed was because it didn't have Hezbollah support to prop it up. And so since then, we've had Jolani, who is an Islamist. I think no one can say he was part of ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra and all these other, and Al-Qaeda at some points of his life. And his people don't like anyone who isn't an Islamist. And so we've seen he's trying to show like he has a clean, his shave is nice now, and he wears suits, and he speaks the language. He tells the Americans, I'm willing to come and be nice, and I'm going to keep the minorities, safe. But on the other hand, we have videos coming out every like 2 days of people of his under his control or that are allies of his going to Alawites and slaughtering them, going to Druze and shaving their beards off and like then slaughtering them. And we have all these different, and Christians obviously. And so the Israelis here, we've been bombing his people, who are coming close to the Druze villages on our south, and the Druze that are more north, we've been dropping in humanitarian aid and all this kind of stuff. So how do you see people in Israel are worried we're going to have another front here? Can Are we going to be pulled into another war on our northern side?
It's definitely another front, but it's also just another war that Israel did not choose to fight, but has to fight. It's not a matter of choice. Unfortunately, Israel has to fight this war too in Syria because it's very much related to the Israeli national security. Not It's not only, I mean, when Israel is fighting for the to protect the Druze, it's mainly for Israel's national security, plus of course the Druze, but it's mainly for Israel's national security. When it fights, I'll tell you, when it fights against Al-Julani and his ideology and his people, his terrorists, they are literally terrorists. It's also related to Israel's national security more than it is about the Alawites or the Syrian people in general. I mean, the liberal ones, the Christians, the Syrians, and so the Christians, the Alawites, the Druze, and so on, the Kurds, exactly. So it's mainly about Israel's security. Why? First of all, Israel after October 7 is not the Israel that we knew before October 7. Today, Israel is a key regional player. I like to call it the agenda setter, one of the main agenda setters in the region. There are two key players in the region. I mean, forget about everyone, or three, let's say. Three key players in the region. Forget about everyone else. And if we focus on these three and how they move, we will understand the chessboard of the Middle East. One of them is definitely Israel now, the other is Turkey, and the third is Saudi Arabia. If we see the moves of these three and how they interact with each other, we will understand everything happening in the region now. Why these three in particular? Israel, first of all, before October 7 was only this small country in the region that's always defending or preoccupied with defending itself against the terrorist organizations who are targeting it from everywhere, either inside domestically, like Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, or from outside, like the Iran sponsored militias. Hezbollah, the Houthis, and so on. So this was Israel before October 7. After October 7, we are seeing a completely different Israel, an Israel with a very potent, strong military that got engaged in traditional fights like the war with Iran, for example, and also non-traditional fights with terrorists. And it won. And it won. It is winning. So Israel has become a regional power all of a sudden, and the beauty about it is that Israel knows that it has become a regional power, and it's taking action already to keep this role and build on it, which is amazing. Why? Because it is challenging the growing power of Turkey, which is now replacing the power of Iran. So Israel is moving quickly to avoid Turkey to become the second Iran, because if it becomes so, it will be even more dangerous, because Turkey is not like Iran. Iran is a pariah state, kind of. It's a state nobody wants to deal with. It depends on militia. And so Turkey, on the other hand, it has a very powerful military. It also got engaged in traditional wars and non-traditional wars, and it's a member of the NATO. It's the geostrategic location in the Eastern Mediterranean, Southern Europe, Northern, right above the Middle East and North Africa. it has a very very important geostrategic location also. So its cultural power is still affecting most of North African countries and many of other countries worldwide. So Turkey is important, is big, and we saw that after Israel succeeded in hitting the head of the octopus, if you can say, which is Iran, and then causing some kind of a domino effect that interrupted the land corridor that Iran created by militia over time, extending from militia in Iraq, then to Syria that were supporting Al Assad regime, and then to Hezbollah, and in the south with the Houthis, and so on. So this was interrupted. Israel did a great job in that. Now, what Turkey is doing is that everywhere there is a retreat by Turkey or a withdrawal by Iran, Turkey is just stepping in and trying to take this place. Who's pushing against it? Israel from one side and Saudi Arabia from the other side. Saudi Arabia is doing it through diplomatic talks. Like, for example, trying to befriend the new regime in Syria, Al Jolani terrorist or career jihadist regime, if we can call it so. But Israel, no, Israel does not have time for diplomacy. It's either or. It's either it makes sure that Syria does not represent a threat or just deal with the consequences, you know? So Israel knows that it has to act this way. That's why we are seeing now Israel. Actually, what happened like a few days ago, like Israel I mean, the Israeli fighter jets to get inside Syria, very close to the presidential palace, was a very strong message to Al Julani and his people, Ahmad al Shara and his people, his terrorist fellows who hijacked the leadership in Syria, that we will not tolerate you. We will not allow you to go further. And by the way, I'm shocked how people in the West are so deceived by Al Julani and believing that, oh, he's a moderate guy. Come on, until today, he did not say that he gave up on his jihadist ideology, by the way. Until today, he only shaved his beard. That's not even shaved. He trimmed his
Yes.
beard. That's all he did. And
And
he's wearing
Dalia,
it. You know, that's it.
I will give you the reason why I think people are willing to try to not look at the picture the way it is with him. They want to get rid of the Syrian refugees and they don't even care what happens with here.
Mhm.
They just in Europe want to get rid of them. They had enough of it. The people are voting for parties that are anti immigration because of it. The system is being rocked and they want a way to say these are not refugees anymore. We can bring them back. And I think that is the willful blindness because they want it to be so. And so I think that's the thing. We have to.
Interesting.
We've been talking for a long time, but I wanted to just say one thing before we go. You mentioned about Israel won, at least on its northern side with Hezbollah and Assad, without even pretty much firing anything. We've once in a while we heard at night the Air Force is bombing something in Damascus, but it wasn't like a full-out war. They were bombing weapons coming into Hezbollah. It wasn't bombing the Syrian regime. Um, when before the war, there was in Israel there was a tent that Hezbollah built right on the border with Israel, and this was
Mm,
a big story. And the tent was up for like 2 months before the war, for October 7th, and Israel did not bomb the tent. And we kept on getting leaks in the Israeli press that the military is saying that if we bomb the tent, Hezbollah will respond, and we will have with a full-out war with Hezbollah. If it goes to that, there was all the time Israel will lose all its electricity because they will be able to hit our infrastructure. And then
mm,
people will die because the hospitals will run out of fuel and all this kind of stuff. And the army estimates 30,000 Israelis might die in a war with Hezbollah. And then we had the war with Hezbollah, and it was very uncomfortable, and people moved out of their homes, but we didn't even have anything close to that. There was no days without any electricity. There was no days. And it reminded me that, I don't know if you probably remember, Nasrallah gave a speech on after, I think, the second Lebanon war, which he called the Israeli society the spider webs. that you
Oh
remember
yeah,
that when if we cut one and we cut the other one, it's over. You just have to like hit them where it hurts. And I was
yes.
thinking they are the real spider webs because they put up this very strong facade, but when you hit them, they're very weak. They're very
They
vulnerable. They're
are.
very. You just need to get them where it hurts.
I tell you why. Actually, this is a very good point, by the way, Ariel. Thank you for bringing it up because actually, people think that these militia, Iran sponsored militia, they claim that they are working on behalf of their own people. Like Hezbollah
Yes.
is claiming that they are working for the good of the Lebanese. The Houthi are claiming that they are fighting for Yemen or resisting for the sake of Yemen. Hamas also even are claiming that they are fighting for the people of Gaza. But the truth
Hmm.
is, none of them is fighting for their own people. They are actually using their own people as tools in their
Yes.
fight for their Islamist ideology. Nothing
Hmm.
else, actually, for their extremist ideology. And in the case of Hezbollah, and so it was for the service of Iran. And look what they did in their countries. Hezbollah destroyed Lebanon. Lebanon was on
Hmm.
the brink of fall if Israel did not intervene at this time, by the way. And I tell you, I meet a lot of Lebanese here in the country I am in. And you know, when we start speaking about the region, and so they tell me only if Israel continued, I we don't know like why they withdrew so early, why they stopped fighting so early. We just wanted them to finish, you know, the
Yeah.
job, and so this is the attitude. People are so happy with what Israel did. Why? Because they see Iran as a foreign body inside their own, but like a cancer they want to
Hmm.
get rid of. The same story in Yemen. The same story was in Syria with the Shia militia there that were removed and led to the fall of Assad. The same story now with Iraq, which is kind of occupied by Iran,
Yes.
literally. So yes, so these are groups that are destroying Arabs, not helping them. And many Arabs today are just realizing that Israel is the good neighbor in this region, not Iran.
Dalia Ziada, it was such a pleasure talking to you. I have to again say how much I like. I don't want to be in Hebrew there's a phrase, don't say good things about someone in front of them, but I think that from all you've been speaking today and obviously your story, it's you are someone that I hope a lot of people try to emulate. I know that I probably wouldn't have the bravery that you have, but it is what it is. So I appreciate everything that you've done for truth and for the good, just good versus evil. And because I do think that, for example, with Hamas and Israel, there's good versus evil. Most of the
Yes,
world, a lot of times there isn't. It's more complicated. There's gray zones on these types of things. Like you said, coming in, killing innocent civilians just for the sake of killing them, then hiding behind your own innocent civilians, all these types of things. There's good versus evil sometimes, and you can see them. And it takes a lot of bravery to sometimes call it out because people around you don't want you to do it. So, and you're paying the price. So, I really appreciate everything you've done, and your work is amazing. So, thank you so much for being with us. And I will
thank
just
you.
also say to our viewers and listeners that um, send me, most people have my WhatsApp, you have my email, you could put in the comments questions for Dalia. And if they are respectful, we've had it depends. Sometimes the algorithm brings it to people who are very not don't like what we're saying. But if you're respectful, I will pass them on. And if Dalia feels wants to answer, she can answer. So thank you so much, Dalia. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will
Thank
see you
you.
on our next episode.